Hello, bravs. We're back with another ghost story from Michigan Haunts and Hauntings. I can't talk. Michigan Haunts and Hauntings by Marion Kuclo, also known as Gundella the Witch. This story will come from Haunted Graveyards, Chapter 6. Most ghosts seem to have a reason for haunting. More often than not, they seem to want to convey a message to the living. Therefore, it would be rather unlikely that they would hang around cemeteries lurking behind tombstones, where living humans seldom visit. Still, some have been seen around graveyards. These ghosts, rather than trying to communicate with the living, appear to be seeking out spirits of others like themselves. But why do they cling to their earthly appearances and not go on to other planes? The Crouch Murders. My friend Gloria Ladd is a respected author and illustrator who has studied and taken part in psychic experiments conducted in the U.S., the former USSR, and China. She was hard at work gathering material for a new book, The Crouch Murders, when she invited me to accompany her to the grave sites of some of the victims of the Crouch mass murder. After hearing a synopsis of the Crouch story, I became fascinated and readily accepted her invitation. On November 21st, 1883, in the then small community of Jackson, Michigan, there was a hideous mass murder. It is still unsolved to this day. All of those even remotely involved have since died and taken their secrets with them to the grave. Jacob Crouch, 74, his daughter Eunice White, 32, and in her 9th month of pregnancy. Henry White, 30, Eunice's husband, and a 24-year-old man named Moses Polly, who was visiting the Crouch family from out of town, were all shot to death while sleeping in their beds. This crime was carried out during a treacherous thunderstorm that toppled many trees and caused untold damage to outbuildings, not only on the Crouch property, but on neighboring farms for miles around. 2 months later, on January 2nd, 1884, the naked body of Susan Halcombe, Jacob Crouch's remaining daughter, was found on the floor of her bedroom. It appeared that she had died, writhing in pain from poison administered by an unknown hand. James Fay, who worked as a farmhand for Jacob Crouch and later for his son-in-law Daniel Halcombe, Susan's husband, was also found dead shortly thereafter. Some say his death was a suicide, others claim it was a murder. In the years that followed, several men were brought to trial for these 6 crimes, 7 if you count the unborn child whose mother was gruesomely murdered. But none of them was ever convicted. Jacob Crouch was buried in the tiny cemetery at the corner of Horton and Reynolds Roads, a mile from the Crouch home. Eunice and her husband lie 5 miles away in the large St. John's Cemetery. Within the Jackson City limits, no 2 burial sites could differ more. Jacob's grave is neglected and overgrown in an area that looks much as it did 100 years ago. Eunice's grave is near a well-traveled highway in a cemetery still in use today. New graves lie beside old ones, and the grounds around them are neatly trimmed. Tradition has it that Eunice rises from her grave each year on the anniversary of the murders and travels to her father's tomb, and that the old man's ghost appears to greet her. The first visit Gloria Ladd and I made to the graves was on a bright summer afternoon in June 1989. First, we inspected the St. John's gravesite, and then we drove out into the country to see Jacob's final resting place. The reunions between father and daughter are said to take place at the old Reynolds Cemetery, never at St. John's. After visiting both sites, it is not hard to understand why. Upon entering the Reynolds Cemetery, one experiences an eerie quiet. My first impulse was to lower my voice to a whisper. I would not have been surprised if an apparition had materialized at any moment. None did. Gloria and I promised each other that we would return on November 21st and see if we might be lucky enough to witness Eunice's reunion with her father. In the past, the specters had been reported to appear any time from dusk on the 21st to dawn the 22nd. Not wanting to miss anything that November, we arrived well before dark at the Reynolds graveyard and parked our car at an angle that afforded us both a wide view of the little cemetery. We were warmly dressed and fortified with blankets and a thermos jug of hot coffee. The evening passed uneventfully, but by 11 o'clock we were becoming stiff from sitting so long and got out of the car to stretch. And after drinking so much coffee, we both needed to relieve ourselves. With the aid of a flashlight, we picked our way toward an old outhouse behind an abandoned building on the opposite side of the cemetery. Around the graves we went, making our way through the tangled underbrush. On the way back to the car, we began to realize that neither of us was as young as she used to be. It was a very cold night, and two arthritic old women would certainly have been better off at home by the fire than out in the middle of an unlit cemetery ghost hunting. Then we stopped dead. It was a clear night, but at the west end of the graveyard, we saw a patch of fog resembling a small cloud. Our aches and pains were completely forgotten. Mesmerized, we watched as the mass of vapor drifted gently across the cemetery. There was little or no wind, but the cloud moved smoothly and evenly, crossing directly in front of us. When it reached Jacob's grave, it stopped and hung in the air for several seconds before fading completely away. We went back to the car and watched diligently for the rest of the night. Nothing more happened. What was it that we saw? A ghost? And if so, was it Eunice visiting her father, or Jacob returning to his own grave after visiting his daughter? The fog cloud had not taken the shape of a man or a woman, nor any other real shape at all. Was the visit completed, or did we scare it away? Had it faded because it became aware of our presence? Should you decide to visit the haunted gravesite on the anniversary of the Grisly Crouch murders, take a word of advice from one who has been there. Dress warmly, or your shivers may come from the weather and not from looking at ghostly forms. And take along a flashlight, not to shine on the specters, but to see where you are stepping. There are no streetlights on those county roads, and it can be very, very dark, even on a moonlit night in Reynolds Graveyard. All right, Bobs, that's all. Goodbye.